it said that the US Senate was designed to be a slow moving, deliberative body because any passing of any law was necessarily an abridgment of a personal freedom.
Hmm.
And I would submit that in addition to the words personal freedom should be and responsibility,
Hmm.
right? So
I
you
agree.
have the responsibility to do your own homework and to be as learned as you can about topics. You can elect to outsource if you want, which is what empowers. If enough people elect to outsource and have a rule made, then that's what gives rise to the passage of a law.
Hmm.
But it shouldn't be where we're told, especially by unelected officials,
Hmm.
what we need to do. So we kind of going back, we kind of identified this concept of the principles leading to decision making that we employ ourselves, which then should inform the way we interact in regard and empower government. But there's a thin reed in that some of these arguments could be made on either side, right? In other words, let's imagine we go back and we talk about how the limitations of the empirical method,
Hmm.
right? How we're still trying to figure it out. We make mistakes. Um, if you then, by analogy, say that the limitations of the empirical method, just as they fail to completely uncover the natural workings of the universe, couldn't you also say that an issue with language is that its imperfect nature limits our ability to express things and to form our own thinking about it, because our thinking is manifested in words? Wouldn't that then also limit our ability to then articulate what we see as objective truth versus subjective
Hmm.
truth or morality?
Well, it certainly does. That's really the challenge here. Now we're back to Immanuel Kant in the 18th century and the idea that your mind interprets your senses and the result is knowledge for you. Well, your mind isn't mine, your senses aren't mine, so there can be no such thing as absolute truth. That's first chapter of the book. Kant says you can't know the thing in itself. Well, there's some truth in that. Not only in the context by which my senses aren't yours, my thinking isn't exactly yours, but also the words by which I communicate what I believe truth to be are themselves contextually driven. The later Wittgenstein spoke of language games. If I say the Rangers stole a base, that means a completely different thing at the ballpark in Arlington than it means on the island of Cuba, right? Completely different thing. And so the language, because it's contextually driven, and my context may not be yours, you may not even know my context, I may not know your context, then not only is my experience of the world limited to my own finite fallen mind interpreting my finite fallen senses, but then the way I express that to the world is itself on a level subjectively driven as well. So that's the argument that leads us to a post-truth culture, to a claim that all truth is personal, individual, and subjective. Now, the other side of that would make the argument, and this is a very complex philosophical discussion, but to make the argument that while yes, my mind and my senses are limited, I nonetheless am experiencing an objective reality that is objectively there regardless of my experience of it. There is an objective truth. There is an objective world. There is an objective tree outside the window that I'm looking at as I'm speaking to you. Now, the way I describe it to you and the way you might describe it to me could look different. If one of us is colorblind, we're going to experience it sensorily differently, but that doesn't mean there's not a tree. That doesn't mean there's not an objective tree we can seek to understand. And that's what's being lost by the post-truth culture that's given up any concept of an objective truth that we could aspire to understand and communicate.